Hello there. Seems you have arrived a bit early. Yes, I know it's dark. But you're still early. It is the time difference, you know? Me too. I just want to fall asleep so much earlier than normal. But then I force myself to stay awake. And then I'm so tired the next day. Anyways, should we continue on with Magic Bites by Ilona Andrews? Perfect. What could wipe out a vampire and a night diviner? The vampire, super fast and able to take out a SWAT team unaided, would prove hard prey by itself. The vampire plus Greg made for a near impossible kill. Yet, there they were, both dead. I leaned back, thinking, the killer would have to possess great power. He would have to be faster than a vampire, stronger enough to tear the head off a body, and able to shield himself from Greg's magic and his mace. Off the top of my head, the list of possible murderers was rather short. First, the people could have sought to kill Greg and used one of their vamps as bait. An aged vampire in the hands of an experienced and able master of the dead was a weapon like no other. If there was more than one, they could have taken out Greg and their own bloodsucker. It was expensive and improbable, since Greg was particularly effective against vampires, but it wasn't impossible. Second, the condition of Greg's ravaged corpse pointed to the shape changers. That kind of damage had to be done with claws and teeth, and by more than one set of them. Perhaps it was the Loop, a deranged shape changer. The bodies of those afflicted with Lycos virus, or like V for short, yearned to slaughter without discrimination, while their minds sought to restrain the bloodlust. If the mind won over the body, a shape changer became a free man of the code. Existing within a well-structured and highly disciplined pack, if the body conquered the mind, a shape changer became a Loop, a cannibalistic murderer driven mad by hormones, hunting everything and hunted by everyone. The Loop theory was even less probable than the people theory. For one, the beheaded vamp was untouched, except for its neck, and loops torn to everything with maniacal frenzy. Next, Greg would have killed more than one of them, and no other bodies littered the scene. Third, if the murderer was a Loop, or more likely, several of them, they would have left a ton of evidence at the scene. Everything from saliva and hair to their own blood. The medical examiner's office had genetic profiles on almost all known shape changer types. As far as I could discern, the file contained no paper showing that any shape changer DNA had been found at the scene. Rubbing my face didn't give me any special insights into the situation. Most likely, the murders had been committed by none of the above, and for the time being, I had to leave it at that. The autopsy reports confirmed the beheaded cadaver as Homo sapiens immortus, a vampire, an ironic name since the mind of a human died the moment vampirism took hold. The vampires knew no pity and no fear. They couldn't be trained. They had no ego. On a developmental level, they stood close to insects, possessing a nervous system and yet incapable of forming thoughts. An insatiable hunger for blood ruled them, and they slaughtered everything in their path in their urge to quench it. I frowned. The file contained no M-scan. All crime scenes involving death or assault were routinely scanned for magic. Technically, both the police and MSDU could demand access to the file and be granted such access by a court order. The fact that an M-scan was missing meant that it showed something that the order didn't wish to reveal to the general public, unless the same cretin that took the photographs somehow managed to drop the scan in the trash. The only remaining page in the file listed several female names: Sandra Mollett, Angelina Gomez, Jennifer Ying, Elisa Canova. None of them sounded familiar, and no explanation of the list was offered. A fresh examination of my hair revealed that it was no longer glowing. I made a quick dash to the desk and dialed the number listed in the police report. A gruff voice answered the phone. I introduced myself and asked for the lead detective. I'm looking into the murder of the night diviner. Is that right? I look like a librarian, but also in a therapy session. Oh, interesting. Very nice. We've spoken to you people, the man on the other end said. Read the goddamned report. Oh, read the goddamn report. You haven't spoken to me, sir. I would very much appreciate any time you could find for me. Any time at all. The phone clanged and I was greeted by a disconnect signal. So much for interagency cooperation. The watch on my wrist showed 12:58. I'd have time to hit the morgue. The mandatory 1-month waiting period for the dead vampires were nowhere close to running out, and the MA sticker would ensue that I'd have no problem taking a look at the bloodsucker's body. I closed the file, placed it on the closest filing cabinet, and made my escape. The city morgue stood in the middle of the downtown district. Directly across from it, past the wide expanse of the unnamed square, rose the golden dome of the Capitol building. The old morgue had been leveled twice, first by a rogue master of the dead, and second by a golem, the same one that created the unnamed square when it reduced the 5 city blocks to rubble in its failed attempt to break through the Capitol's wards. Even now, 6 years later, the city's council refused to rename the empty space surrounding the Capitol, reasoning that as long as it had no name, nobody could summon anything there. The new morgue was constructed on the principle of a third time's the charm. Yeah, I could cozy up with this blanket too and get some nice sleep, huh? I mean, if you want some blanket, there's plenty to go around. Back to reading I go. This is so comfy, by the way. This husband pillow, Snoopy, Charlie Brown, whatever. Snoopy and the bird, technically. So comfy. A state-of-the-art facility. It looked like the bastard offspring of a prison and a fortress, with a bit of medieval castle thrown in for good measure. The locals joked that if the Capitol building came under attack again, the state legislator could just run across the square and hide in the morgue. Looking at it, I could believe it too. A severe, forbidding building, the morgue loomed among the dolled-up facades of the corporation headquarters like the Grim Reaper at a tea party. Its mercantile neighbors had to be unhappy about its presence in their midst, but could do nothing about it. The morgue got more traffic than all of them. Another sign of the times. I walked up the wide staircase between granite columns and moved through the revolving door into a wide hall. The high windows admitted plenty of light, but failed to banish the gloom completely. It pooled in the corners and along the walls, lying in wait to clutch at the ankles of the unwary passerby. Polished tiles of gray granite covered the floor. 2 hallways radiated from the opposite wall. both flooded by blue Fey lantern light. The tiles ended there, replaced by yellowish linoleum. The air smelled of death. It wasn't the actual nauseating odor of the rotting flesh, but a different kind of stench. One of chlorine and formaldehyde and bitter medicines, reminiscent of a hospital smell, but nobody would confuse the two. In the hospital, life left its sure signs. Here, only its absence could be felt. There was an information desk between the two hallways. I made my way to it and introduced myself to a clerk in green scrubs. He glanced at my ID and nodded. He's in 7C. You know where it is. Yes, I've been there before. Good. Go ahead. I'll get someone to open it for you. I took the right hallway to a flight of stairs and went down into the basement level. I passed Section B and came to a stop at its end where a steel gate barred my progress. After 5 minutes or so, hurried steps echoed through the hallway, and a woman wearing green scrubs and a stained apron came rushing around the corner. She carried a thick three-ring binder in one hand and a jingling keychain in the other. A few thin wisps of blonde hair had escaped her sterile hairnet. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and the skin on her face sagged a little. Sorry, I said. Nah, don't worry about it, she said, fumbling with keys. It didn't hurt to take a walk. She unlocked the gate and swept past me. I followed her to a reinforced steel door. She opened 2 blocks, stepped back, and barked, It is I, Julianne, who commands you, and you shall do my bidding. Open! The magic shifted. Suddenly, as the spell released the door, Julianne swung it open. Inside, on a metal table riveted to the floor, lay a nude body. Stark against the stainless steel, it was a queer shade of pale, whitish pink as if it had been bleached. A silver steel harness enclosed the cadaver's chest. A chain as thick as my arm stretched from the harness to a ring in the floor. We usually just collar them, but with this one... Julian waved her hand. Yeah, I guess at the stump of the neck. I glanced at the stump of the neck. Not that he'll rise or anything, not without a head. Still, if anything... She nodded towards the blue circle of a panic button on the nearest wall. You armed? I unsheathed Slayer. Julian jerked back from the shimmering blade. Whoa, okay. That'll work. I slid the saber back into its sheath. There was a second body brought in with this one. Yeah, kind of hard to forget that one. Any trace of evidence? Nice try, Julian smirked. That's classified. I see. What about an M scan? That's classified too. I sighed. Greg, with his dark eyes and perfect face, mangled and broken, locked away in some cubicle in this lonely, sterile place. I fought the urge to double over and cradle the empty space in my chest. Julian touched my shoulder. Who was he to you? She asked. My guardian, I told her. Apparently my efforts to appear impartial had suffered a spectacular failure. You were close? No, we used to be. What happened? I shrugged. I grew up and he forgot to notice. Did he have any kids? No, no wife, no children. Just me. Julian glanced at the vampire's corpse with obvious disgust. You'd think the Order would have enough sensitivity to assign someone not related to this mess. I volunteered. She gave me an odd look. How about that? I hope you know what you're doing. So do I. There's no chance you'd let me glance at the M-scan. She pursed her lips, thinking. Did you hear that? I shook my head. I think someone's at the gate. I'm to go and check on it. I'm putting my binder right here. Now these are confidential reports. I don't want you looking at them. In particular, I don't want you looking at the reports from the 3rd of this month. We're taking any copies out of this file. She turned and marched out of the room. I flipped through the notebook. There were 8 autopsies on the 3rd. Finding Greg's didn't prove to be a problem. The trace evidence consisted of 4 hairs. In the origin column, someone penciled un, PSB, feline, unidentified, possibly a feline derivative, not a feline shapeshifter. They would have pegged it as a Homo sapiens with a specific Felidae genus. The long folded sheet of the scan came next. Obeying the shake of my hand, it unfolded to its full 3 feet, presenting a graph drawn by the delicate needles of the magic scanner. The faint colored lines of the graph wavered, a sure sign of many magical influences colliding in one spot. It was inconclusive by the most lax of standards, and no court would have permitted it into evidence. The small header in the top corner identified it as a copy. Oh, goody. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Greg's body had continued to release its magic even after his death, and the scanner recorded it as a sloping gray line, sometimes an inch wide, sometimes almost invisible. The deep, jagged purple cutting across it had to be the vampire's magic. I looked harder. There was a 3rd line, actually a series of lines, faint and dashing, at irregular intervals, through the reading. The longest was about a 1/4 of an inch long, and the color was undeterminable. I raised the graph so the light of the ceiling bulb shone through it. The ink stood out. Yellow. What the hell registered yellow? I tugged at the graph, tearing it along the perforated lines, and slid it into my folder. Julianne returned shortly. Nobody there. Well, I'll leave you to it. She took the binder and walked out, leaving me with the vampire's corpse. I slipped on a pair of medical gloves and approached the body. The placement of brands depended on the personality of the master of the dead. Filion marked his with a big eye of horse, smack in the middle of the forehead. Constance marked hers in the left armpit, since the forehead on this one was conveniently missing. It could have belonged to Filion. Theoretically, I set about finding the brand. The armpits were clean, so was the chest, the spine, the back, the buttocks, the inside of the thighs and ankles. The only place remaining was the scrotum. So I spread the vampire's legs. The testicles diminished immediately after the human's death, and continued to shrink during the vampire's life. There is a whole study on dating the bloodsuckers based on the size of the reproductive organs. I didn't know how old this guy was, but judging by the signs, he had to be pushing 50. And he was clean. No brand. There was a scar, however, cleaving the scrotum at the base of the left side. It looked like it had been stitched together. A quick glance about told me I would find no scalpel in this room. I took Slayer from its sheath. It smoked, sensing the undead. Thin tendrils of pale haze curved from the blade. Don't start dripping, I murmured, and pressed the very tip of the edge against the scar. The undead issued hissed as the blade sank into the flesh. I let it cut about a 1/4 of an inch and withdrew the saber, leaving a neat incision. Taking the flap of the skin, I pulled on it lightly, and it came away from the groin, revealing a smooth, burned scar about an inch wide and 3/4 of an inch long. In the middle of the burned scar sat a neat scorch mark, an arrow tipped with a circle instead of an arrowhead. Gastex brand. Why wasn't I surprised? You do know there are penalties for mutilating corpses, said a male voice. Spun around, blade in my hand. A tall man stood leaning against the doorway. He wore scrubs, which meant he had more of a right to be here than I did. Watch out there, he said. Sorry, I lowered the saber. I don't like being startled. Neither do I, except young attractive women. He looked to be in his mid-30s. The colored stripe on his shoulder shone bright orange. the third-level clearance. The tag clipped to his suit confirmed it. I'd gotten a bloody unit supervisor. A unit supervisor could make a person non grata in the morgue faster than I could blink. The man waited until I finished staring at his tag and held out his left hand. My name's Crest. I peeled off my left glove without putting down Slayer and shook his hand. Kate. Is there a first name that goes with Crest? Yes, but I don't like it. Funny guy. Perhaps I could get away without a black eye for dicing a corpse. It's a vampire, I said. I was looking for the brand. Find it? Yes. He approached the table to examine my handiwork. I moved to stand across from him. Dr. Crest was actually on the appealing side. Auburn hair, tall and quite muscular, judging by the forearms. A pleasant face, open and honest, with large, well-defined features and nice eyes. Honey brown and warm. The full mouth was downright sensuous. Attractive fellow, not strictly handsome in a classical sense, but still. He looked up from the body, smiled, and became handsome. I smiled back, trying to radiate integrity and decency of character. That's right, I'll be very nice to you, sir. Just please don't bar me from the morgue. Interesting, he said. Never seen one concealed in this way. Neither have I. See a lot of vampires in your line of work? Unfortunately. I caught him glancing at me and he lowered his gaze back to the body. Dr. Crest. He blinked. Yes. Do I need to let Julianne know about the brand? It's the least I could do. No, I can tell her myself if you have to run. A little warning bell went off in my head. The good doctor was a little too accommodating. I would have to make sure that Julianne got my message. Crest was frowning at the corpse. A devious place to put a brand. Gastek was a devious fellow. Indeed. Another pause issued. Let me walk you upstairs, he said. How charming. He was trying to make sure I didn't go on a mutilating rampage. I gave him my knockout smile. Sure. He didn't look dazzled. Damn it, that's the second time today my smile had misfired. We walked side by side. I waited while he locked the grate behind us. So, what do you do here, Dr. Crest? He grimaced. I suppose one can call it charity work. I made the appropriate noise. Charity? Yes, I perform reconstructive surgery. He glanced at me as if afraid I would demand a nose job. I make corpses presentable. Not everyone can afford it, so twice a week I do it here pro bono. I nodded. It's kids mostly, he said. Torn up and mauled. Not a pretty sight. Such a waste. Reached the upper floor. He waited until I checked out with the clerk and wrote down Julian's number, and then walked me to the door. So I'll see you again sometime, he said. Hopefully not on the operating table, I said, and left the building. As I walked away to where Carmelian waited for me, I could feel Crest watching my back. A man was leaning against my truck. He wore a dark gray shirt, black jeans, tucked in soft boots, and a black cloak that wanted very much to be a cape. While I was in the morgue, the sun had broken through the clouds, flooding the streets with sunshine. He seemed to shrug off the sun's rays, not a man, but a rectangular darkness cut in the shroud of sunlight. The human current streaming up the street bent away from him. People didn't eye him. In fact, they concentrated so hard on ignoring his presence, one could have dropped a $20 bill on the ground, and it might have gone unnoticed. The man's eyes tracked my movement. I stopped a few feet away and looked at him. He reached into an inside pocket of his cloak and flicked what looked like a long yellow ribbon at me. I caught it mid-flight, the smooth, cold body coiled about my wrist, and the serpentine head reared to strike at my face. I clamped at its neck with fingers on my left hand and stopped 3 inches from my cheek. The snake's tongue danced between the scaly lips. Blood red membranes tinged with brilliant purple, flared on both sides of the head, spreading like the wings of an enormous butterfly. The baby winged snake shuddered, trying to take flight, but I held it in check. My feet are cold. Are you enjoying the book so far? Good. I'm cold. I'm sorry, Jim. He held up his arms, indicating something about 3 feet wide. The cloak parted enough to show muscle roll across his chest under the fabric of his shirt. The nest was this big, Kate. His voice had the smooth, almost melodious tone of a less dangerous, much prettier man. It clashed badly with his bulldog ugly mug. You owe me, and you stood me up. I had to do the gig single-handed. The snake twisted in a feeble attempt to sink its fangs into my arm. The long triangular teeth contained no poison, but the bite hurt like hell. Greg's dead, I said. There was a tiny pause before he asked, When? 2 days ago. He was murdered. You want it? Yeah. We stood for a while, caught in a painful silence. He peeled himself from my truck, moving in with the liquid. Animal grace that only a master shapeshifter could achieve. You need anything, you know where to find me. I nodded and watched him walk up the stairs to the morgue. Jim? He scowled at me over his shoulder. Yeah? What are you doing at the morgue? Pack business, he said, and moved on. Everyone had business in the morgue these days. Even Jim. I still owed him for this winter when he pulled me out of a mud pit full of melted snow and hydra. He was the closest thing to a partner I had. Once in a while we shared merc jobs from the guild. This time I had stood him up. I had to make it up to him, but first I'd have to find out who killed Greg. To do that I would have to figure out what Gastix vampire was doing at the murder scene. I eased the pressure of the snake's neck and gently tossed it into the air. The serpent plummeted and suddenly took flight. It soared higher and higher, far above the rooftops into the sunshine, until it finally disappeared from sight. When in doubt, and in need of information, find a snitch and squeeze them. That was one of the very few investigative techniques I was aware of. As a matter of fact, that and the annoy principles involved until the guilty parties decide to kill you pretty much summed it up for me. Move over, Sherlock. I was definitely in doubt and in need of information concerning Gastix's dead vampire, and I knew just the person to squeeze. He had spiky hair, wore black leather, and called himself Bono after some long-forgotten singer. Aw, I don't forget Bono. I used to listen to you too. He was also Gastix's journeyman. If he had a talent for necromancy or necronavigation, the care and piloting of the dead, you qualified as an apprentice. Once you added a bit of knowledge to that, you became a journeyman. To move higher required a genuine power and a drive to succeed. Most people never graduated from the journeymanship. Bono was on his 2nd year. His knowledge of the dead was almost encyclopedic. The last time we met, he gave me a cutout article to put into my almanac. Something about some Slavic corpse-eater creature called an Uper. But I had a feeling his expertise ended with theory. My guess was he would not grow into a master of the dead anytime soon. Bono was easy to find. He frequented Andriano's, a peaceful joint as bars went. Unlike the newly redesigned establishments of Atlanta Underground, where bars leaned toward the rowdy, and most clubs had the word pain in their name, Andriano's occupied a nice little spot on Euclid Avenue, a little 5 points, and catered to an almost middle-class crowd. Bono's pretty face and his, actually, it's getting pretty late, and I really need to make dinner. Will you be mad if we continue this at another time? Good. I'm glad you understand. I can't believe they put the brand, down, hidden in his sack area. Can you? Isn't that just so crazy? I can't imagine that. That'd be very, very painful. I would never join a gang, but if I did, I'm pretty sure at the hint of that's where the branding would be going, I would be like, peace, I am not your ride or die. What about you? Interesting. Well, thanks for coming over and enjoying the book with me. Until next time. Bye.